The most important thing is for us to be creating exceptional work in the world that is unique, inspiring, and authentic, and really take that seriously and don't rush through the process. Design the life that you want to be living and then figure out what you need to do in order to live that life.
The art world is always changing. It's a dynamic space where creativity and commerce collide. Finding your path and staying true to your craft isn't easy. Welcome to the Professional Artist Podcast. This show explores what it truly takes to build a meaningful and sustainable art career. Each week, we offer intimate, in-depth conversations that reveal which business strategies actually work, giving you the inspiration and insight to fuel your artistic journey. I'm your host, Christina Demiani, and today we're exploring the work of Christopher Remmers, a classically trained oil painter whose art blends myth, nature, and psychedelia into rich, narrative-driven pieces. A former instructor at Georgetown Atelier, Christopher now leads the Conscious Creativity Academy, a thriving education space for artists. In this episode, you're going to hear clear and actionable advice from Christopher about important keys to success he has discovered along the way, including time management and how to schedule yourself to ensure time for both admin work and creativity so you can stay productive both on and off the canvas. Tracking finances and data, Christopher highlights how tracking your finances and key data can be surprisingly freeing for artists, providing greater control and clarity over their careers. And finally, entrepreneurial mindset. At the end of the day, Christopher highlights that being an artist is being an entrepreneur. It requires strategy, personal discipline, and the willingness to treat your art like a business. All right, let's head into the gallery and explore the world of Christopher Remmers. We are standing in front of the first piece here that represents your practice. It's called Annicha, and it's pretty epic, Christopher. Can you describe this piece for those listening?
Essentially, it's a man crouched down. He's nude and he's surrounded by this collapsing kind of stone environment that's breaking out into pieces and going off into what seems like space. And there's this wheel on the wall behind him, the wheel of samsara. It's the wheel of human experience and suffering and that we all are engaged in. And there's sculptures, there are stone figures that are falling apart around him. And at his fingertips, there's a crack that's emerging and breaking apart. And all of this is supposed to be this person amidst the impermanence of life and kind of contemplating their place in all of it, of whether or not they become attached and solidified in their ideals or let it open and flow as the river does when we witness it, which is the crack from his fingertips and the blue that's shining up through it. This piece really catalyzed and set into motion what is now the foundation of a methodology that I use and that I actually teach around this idea that the finished painting or even the process of making the painting is such a small part of the creative process. When I was learning about how to compose and create this painting, I realized there was this vast world that existed prior to even like picking up a paintbrush. I wasn't fully aware of what I was doing at the time. I was just immersing myself in experimentation of like how to actually execute a large scale piece of this kind. And so it was this process of hiring models and developing sketches and doing value studies and learning how to use digital tools and how to get reference images and just to embed yourself in the sandbox of experimentation to build something and bring it to life. Part of it was that witnessing what an incredible act it is to have an idea in your head and then to imagine how do you bring that thing to life and that you're pulling the pre-verbal primordial soup from your unconscious and trying to manifest it into whatever it is that you envision, and developing these processes of clarity along every step of the way is like what actually allows you to execute pieces. I think a lot of people, they see it and they're very overwhelmed. It's really just taking a complex idea and breaking it down into simple parts. The creation of this piece and a couple others around this is how I developed that system to take on an ambitious idea, not have it feel overwhelming and like impossible.
Confidence doesn't come out of thin air. It's built through reliable, deliberate processes. Christopher has honed his approach over time into one that balances intuition and structure, chaos and clarity. Behind the emotional depth of his work, there's a clear system and concrete steps in place.
One thing to think about is like this idea of dancing with duality. What I mean by that is that I think as artists, we're operating between two modes of being. On one hand, we have what I describe as like the wild, intuitive, like part of us. It's like the childlike wonder and deep creative exploration and spontaneity and fascination and love with the creative process. And then there's the other side of us, which is like the practical, pragmatic, skill building, execution of deadlines and timelines and cultivating craft. We dance between those two modes based on where we are in the development of a piece. When I first start, it's very much rooted in that place of what I call wild ideation and playfulness. Generally, what I'll do is rough, open, free-form sketching where I'm not trying to make the sketches look good. It's messy. Sometimes it's writing, sometimes it's drawing, sometimes I'll take the idea and I'll go out into nature on a wandering, explore it from a more like somatic or mental place, and then let it develop from there. And then once the idea has become more solidified, where I'm like, okay, this has some traction to it, then I start to go into this other mode where I'm thinking of it more from like a design place of what's the overall compositional feel? How do I think about this from value composition and color composition and shape design? What is like making this feel like a cohesive design, really from an abstract place? Like I try and take the subjectivity out of it and look at it as a compelling orientation of value, gesture, and shape. From there, I can move more quickly and not get bogged down about, oh, like what's the symbolism and what am I getting this very specific idea across? Once I have more of a solidified high level design, then I start thinking about who are the models that I want to work with and hiring them and getting them on a schedule to where they come into the studio. What are some of the environmental components? What are other aspects of this composition that I need to go and get references for and start to build like precise ideas and visual references of what's going to go into this piece. Then from there, it goes into the next stage, which is either using what I use a lot of now, which is like Procreate or a digital tool where I can start to bring in my reference images, bring in the shots from the models that I worked with, and start to do more of a what you could describe as like photo bashing of bringing in all these components into a digital space and starting to kind of puzzle piece them together. And then that goes through all of these like different systems of refinement until I've got something that's looking pretty cohesive. And then I go back to more of an analog, and then I'll develop a color study where I actually do a physical painting, small version of the piece. Finally, then I have both a digital and an analog thing that I can use as a roadmap to help me move on to the painting and feel like I have the confidence to take that through to a finish.
Once again, there is structure, the rhythms and routines that make it possible to keep showing up day after day. Christopher's found a system that supports both his art practice and his business responsibilities. Here's how he approaches the week to week and why structure doesn't have to kill spontaneity.
I think on the onset, it's good for people to know like this is something that you need to test and experiment with and give it fair trial. Develop a schedule and a routine and then test it for a couple weeks and see where you need to tweak things. Because what happens often is that people tend to develop schedules that are overly ambitious and end up getting burnout really quick before they get any traction. And so I often take the route of picking something that's as simplified as possible and that is designed to where I know I can stick to that schedule for the longest period of time consistently possible because it's not always going to be luxurious and exciting and novel. It's going to be you're in the trenches and you've got a lot of work to do and you got to figure out how to stick to it. So, that all being said, there's like levels of this, right? So, I think of that as a high level. And then I look at the big categories of what I'm managing within a week. As many artists I'm sure can relate, is that like it's a very different mindset that we need to have when we're showing up to like administrative work and like book work versus like when we're sitting in front of the canvas. I can have my attention be focused for much longer periods of time when I'm in a painting versus when I'm doing like email campaigns and like invoices and all of this stuff. And so the other part of it is transitioning from one kind of task to the next cognitively. It takes time and you have to reset. And so I try to separate those into their own days or parts of the day where What I currently do, I used to just have admin be on like one day that I would just do like an 8 hour day of all admin and then I would break that apart. But with my current workload and all the things that I'm managing between student relationships and my own stuff, I need to have that be more frequent. And so I have my early mornings for 2 hours every day is like admin and addressing student stuff. And then I have these uninterrupted blocks of time from afternoon until the end of the day that I'm just on painting. Lastly, what I do that's been really helpful is I have a weekly check in on what my week is going to be. So, like for an hour on Sunday, it's the only thing I tend to do work related on Sundays is I just spend an hour looking and mapping out what my week is going to be. I find like oftentimes we're constantly ruminating on what we're doing and the plan to have a dedicated period of time where you can do a brain dump and get it just all out of your head so you don't have to think about it, create a plan, a roadmap, and then just go and you execute. And you don't have to constantly be like rethinking about what am I doing at noon? What am I doing at 1? What am I doing at this time? Just design it, set it, and forget it. Has been really helpful for me.
It's one thing to find systems that work, but it's another to step back and ask why you're building them in the first place and what kind of life vision they are supporting. That deeper clarity about your vision, your values, and your ideal life experience can be the most important foundation of all. Listen as Christopher describes how he approaches this process.
I think a good place to start is nothing is arbitrary. We're living, we have a struggle. We're like, oh my God, I'm terrible with time management. We jump online, we start looking up things around time management, or we start looking up like how to optimize various areas of our lives. And I think prior to doing that, what I think is really useful, and this actually tracks into like how you want to sell your work and what kind of artist you want to be, and all of this, which is this place of design the life that you want to be living and then figure out what you need to do in order to live that life. I find often this step is skipped, which is so critical. Is like people are like, I want to be an artist, and they just jump in and find themselves being pulled in these directions that like they had no intention of wanting to go, like doing client commission work that they don't feel aligned with, or they went down the gallery route because they heard that that was what you do as an artist, and then they hate working with galleries. Sit down and design exactly what that looks like. How much money do you want to be making? What are the clients you're working with? What are the kinds of pieces of artwork you're working? What does your studio look like? How many hours are you working in the studio? What are your vacations like? Map this all out and then essentially design the person and the life that you want to be moving towards.
One thing that stands out in Christopher's journey is how clearly his inner creative structure connects with the way he brings his work into the world. The way he approaches storytelling, both in the studio and in his business, gives a whole new perspective on what it means to share your art.
I think about marketing. You know, as artists, we're storytellers, and that can mean a lot of different things. It can be as literal or as abstract as you want it to be. If you're the artist that wants to sell your work and share it with the public, like you are creating imagery that you're looking for a particular type of clientele and you're looking to how to make that connection. As storytellers, like the more clear that we become around what we're trying to communicate and what it is that we're interested in exploring through our art, then that directly relates to how we sell our work. We're trying to invite people into that story, and that becomes the point of connection in which how we communicate with potential collectors and gallerists and everything, right? Like through that one on one nurturing of client relationships, you're just inviting them into the story that you're living. And so I found that being really useful from my own development because I think like many artists starting out, like I had this really like horrible like gut reaction to like business and marketing and like that whole side of it. It was like, oh, that's gross. I don't want to do that. But it's like actually looking at it through that lens allows me to actually be excited about it and to think about, oh, well, how can I better tell my story through social media and through emails and through client interaction?
Next, we turn our attention to a painting that marks a pivotal moment in Christopher's career. It's a monumental work called Zain.
So Zain is, well, it's quite a large painting, roughly like 8 foot square. It's a scene of a man and a woman sitting back to back, a glowing light in their hands. And there's like an altar, a ceremonial setting that they're sitting on these like intricate, like tapestry woven fabrics. And then above them, there's these ethereal what you would call like the spirit of them that's floating and dispersing around them, swirling around. And then there's these trees that are in the larger environment that are framing the piece. Personally, as like an artist, and what I was trying to develop conceptually and visually was, this piece started to like really bring a lot of these pieces into place. And it felt, okay, this is the direction that I want to go. And I had been dancing around the edges of that for a little bit. Yeah, this piece just like hit all of the right notes. So it was like, okay, this is work that I can see myself doing for the rest of my life. And then the other part of it is this really aided in my career taking off in a big way. I had submitted into the ARC and won in the imaginative realism category. And that coincided with that year. The ARC had been working on developing a relationship with Sotheby's Auction House in New York. If you don't know about the ARC, they're a nonprofit that their mission is to essentially revitalize like classical realism back into the art world, right? Because turn of the century, it fell out of popularity. Abstract expressionism and postmodernism kind of dominated the art world for a very long time. And so their mission is to bring that back in. And part of it is to re educate the public through art schools and systems and ateliers to give this kind of training to students so they can have access to this again. They got Sotheby's on board, and then Sotheby's launched their show, which was important realist works of the 21st century. And my work, that painting, was selected and then auctioned off and sold in that show, which then got me out into the public and in front of an audience that was like very in line with what I was doing. A seed that was planted with me early on in all of the things we can be doing in terms of leveraging how we get ourselves out into the world and create opportunity for ourselves. The seed of be so good they can't ignore you was like something that was really on the forefront of my mind early on. It was like, take your time, get as good as you possibly can with your craft, because that is going to carry most of the weight, beyond whatever marketing or business tricks or things that you can do. Like those all push the dial a little bit, but ultimately, like the most important thing is for us to be creating exceptional work in the world that is unique, inspiring, and authentic, and to like really take that seriously and don't rush through the process. So often I talk to students and people that they're so quick to go and sell their work and they haven't developed their craft. And it's take the time. If you're not taking the time to do the thing that you love the most, like what the heck are you out here doing this for? I still have doubt and, so-called imposter syndrome. And, I don't know that that ever truly goes away. I think it's minimized, but what do they say about bravery? It's not that like you act without fear, it's that you act despite the fear that you have, right? And that you never know until you try. Like you just have to put yourself out there and accept that like failure is 100% a part of this process. I mean, I have been denied and failed from submissions to shows to all of these things numerous times. That should never be an indication that your work isn't good enough or that you should stop trying, especially within the art world. Like things are not tracking it like specifically as like merit is specifically related to success all the time. You don't know like the judge's orientation around what they're attracted to. Like it's so hard for that to be non-subjective. And so yeah, I would just say to build the confidence is just do a lot of it. Just try a lot, write a lot of submission letters, apply to a lot of galleries, just get in the motions of like just doing it, regardless of if you're getting success or not in the early stages. You just need to get good at doing it a lot.
For many artists, embracing the practical, numbers driven side of their business can feel foreign and uncomfortable at first. It often requires a deliberate shift in mindset and learning to separate emotions from the essential data that guide business growth and focus.
I was working specifically with a business coach around this particular aspect of business. She was like, man, if you're not tracking your numbers, like you're not running a business. If you look at the numbers, you can clearly see where the constraints are and where you need to focus your attention. And just for me, it was actually a huge relief because I like was then able to give myself the permission to like not actually think of it in such an emotional way and just be able to look at what are the important things to focus my attention on and all the other stuff that actually doesn't even matter.
Seeing the numbers clearly can feel like a breath of fresh air. a way to move past uncertainty and truly understand the business you're building. With that clarity, it's easier to strategize and decide how you want to grow and what to focus on next. Let's hear how Christopher has diversified his business.
The combination is goes between like I've got my newest branch, which is focusing on like public art commissions and public work. And then I've got more private commission work. And then I've got my academy, which is like a more robust lifetime access program. Then I've got mini courses. So I've got from like my artwork creation to education. And there's kind of two variations within each of those. Direct sales are for the last year, I haven't been like really prioritizing that as much just because frankly I haven't had the time. But like I'm still creating my own personal work coinciding with other elements of teaching. And it's happening. It's just not like right now it's a pillar that's not getting as much attention at the moment. But the cool thing about it is the line is blurred between kind of my commission work and my personal work in the sense that I've curated that to be those paintings are very much like the kind of paintings that I want to be making anyway. And this started a while back in terms of just realizing that people are coming to us as artists because they see our work and they're inspired by it and they want us to make something that is either keen into a story that they resonate with or that they want to be seen in or told through. But ultimately, like you get to decide the creative direction of that work, or you can decide whether you want to work with that client or not. But I just slowly over time started stepping in and offering feedback and offering like design choices and noticing that clients actually really appreciated that. I mean, frankly, a lot of people that want commission work, they feel really uncomfortable as to what's the thing that they want. And so it's good to develop that skill as an artist.
Every artist faces moments of doubt. That's when peer support becomes more than just encouragement. It becomes a mirror, helping us return to what truly matters. As we continue, Christopher tells us about a piece he's currently working on and how it represents a powerful return to his creative truth, thanks to the support of people who care about him.
The piece is yet to be named, and it's the one that's right behind me. It's in progress. And it was interesting, like thinking about this idea of a piece that's represented by peer support. Like, I think when we're in business as artists and we're sending work out and maybe things aren't selling quite as good, and that tends to fill us with like doubt around the ideas that we're putting out there, or the kind of work that we're making. And then we get into this place that can be really sticky and threatening, which is like we start to try and create work that we think other people want us to be making. And then we like move away from the work that we want to be making. And I got into a period of time where I was definitely doing that, where I was like, okay, I need to work smaller. I need to be more simplified, less psychedelic, spiritual, extreme, and was just trying to find stuff that was like more accessible to the market. It didn't work. I mean, I was selling stuff, but just not to the degree that I wanted. And then I found I wasn't really like enjoying the paintings I was making, and I was like, or I was rushing through the process, and I lost myself temporarily. And I've got this wonderful group of friends. I've got a gallery here downtown, and like I've known in the community in the sense, and I was getting really valuable feedback from them about, well, this isn't who you are. This isn't what we know you as. Like, we know you as this artist that does these like epic, large, multi-figure pieces, and those are what people love. That's what people want. So this piece was like me going back into that space and be like, you know what? Like, I need to reconnect with like that thing that I had when I painted Zain, when I painted those like Annicha and the Oracle and all of these big pieces that honestly they sold straight away. And like they took me a long time, but it was what I wanted to be doing. And so this painting is me like really coming back to that. And the question that comes up is, if you're not doing that as an artist, what are you doing this for? There's plenty of other jobs you can do to make money more easily. And so go do that if you're like not doing the thing that you love. And I know there'll be people that argue about needing to do certain work like this or that to be able to pay the bills. And there's chapters, there's phases that we go through where, yeah, maybe we're not doing it as resonant, but just like I would just say, is stay aligned with the vision that you map out for yourself and never give up on that.
Let's talk about you as a mentor. So, this is a very beautiful thing, as you mentioned, you've started to do in recent years in your business. It's transformed your business. Tell us what you teach your students and what is the experience of working with you.
So I have an academy. That's the primary mode of how I teach, which is called the Conscious Creativity Academy. It started out as like a one-on-one function. I mean, it started like the early stages of it was when I was teaching at the atelier. I just started to notice the ways that I was engaging with the students and the things that I was helping them with. And then also noticing what were like these big topics and issues that weren't getting addressed, that there weren't like necessarily strong resources for students that were in an atelier or that wanted to become professional artists. Those were things that I was already figuring out on my own and had started to develop systems around. And so I started helping students with these things, which was essentially like outside of like purely developing your technical skills. There was the whole thing of, well, what is it that you want to communicate and how do you figure that out? How do you deal with the challenging issues of self-confidence and all of the like limiting beliefs that tend to challenge a lot of artists and keep them from ever trying to do anything, to what a huge thing is, which is discipline and structure and routine and like this kind of big picture thing of like you as the artist that's demanding all of these things on yourself, and how do you show up and keep doing that consistently from what I describe as like a generative mindset. And so there's those kind of high level topics of these things are mainly unaddressed and not being related directly to artists. And so that set the stage for the Conscious Creativity Academy.
Artists often hit a wall when it comes to the business side of their work, feeling stuck, unsure how to move forward with tasks they know they need to do, but find hard to start. Here's what Christopher has to say to artists who are running into resistance in their business.
I think a lot of it has to do with feeling like they don't understand, like they don't know how to do the thing. What we're finding out like about procrastination, like where a lot of people have this judgment that they're being lazy when really it's simply that they don't have enough clarity over what they're trying to accomplish to be able to execute the thing. And then the other part of it is just having a routine and a structure that supports them being able to do that thing. Oftentimes there's like an anxiety built up because there's like a bunch of stuff on the plate. There's no organization around what are the things to be working on and when are the best times to be working on it. And it's often just we just create these long lists and it just keep pushing those things that we don't know, that we don't understand, or that we don't want to do to the end of the list, and it keeps on not getting done. And so usually with my students, if there's a process that I've helped a lot of my students with this, is I actually help them design a schedule and a routine to actually identify what are the things that they struggle with and why, and then help them design around that to make sure that they're doing the thing. And in some cases, like break it down into simple parts so that like it's more manageable. Oftentimes it's such a daunting task with multiple complicated parts that we don't understand until, okay, let's break this down, set some timelines, and then do one little thing at a time. You're no different than any other entrepreneur in the world. There's the sacrifice, right? There's the pros and cons. Like you work for a company, you don't have to think about scheduling, you don't have to think about invoices, you don't have to think about admin. You have a job, you show up and you do it. But what you're sacrificing is the freedom and a cap at what you're able to earn, the amount of lifestyle choices you can have the freedom to navigate. By being an artist, you're deciding to be an entrepreneur. It's giving you the freedom to actually grow as much as you are willing to put the work into it. The con of that is that like it requires you cultivating discipline and a deep understanding and business acumen to make this happen for yourself. There's a part of me that's okay, you want to do this. This is hard work. Grow up and get busy and start your business. That like, yeah, it's not your favorite thing to do, but there's ways that we can either gamify it or make it more engaging and more interesting. And, it's the sacrifice to create the lifestyle that we want. Get really clear on your why and what. It's worth taking the time to like thoroughly investigate like why is it that you want to be an artist and what is it that you're wanting to communicate with people and in what way. It seems like such a simple thing, but even with my students, like we go through these levels of getting more granular, getting more specific, like refining. As they do, it allows them to just know exactly what are the right things to focus on and what are the things that are wasting our time. And so taking time to really sit down, be intentional about what it is that you want and what you're trying to communicate and contribute to the world as an artist, I think that that'll help you out tremendously in terms of understanding the teachers, the mentors, the schools to go to, like what are the right actions to be taking.
Christopher Remmers offered a thoughtful, honest look at what it really takes to build a sustainable and meaningful art business. From the detailed stages of his creative process to the way he structures his days, Christopher reminded us that being an artist isn't about waiting for inspiration to strike. It's about having the mindset of an entrepreneur, creating deliberate processes, designing a life that you want to live, and going for it, one step at a time. This podcast grows because people like you share it. So if you got value today, if it inspired you to think differently or take action, hit follow or subscribe and send it to one person who needs to hear it. That's how we keep making more episodes. Thank you for listening to the Professional Artist Podcast, and until next time.